My name is James Spear, and today I'll be giving a presentation on the destruction of Iraq's religious symbolism, an in-depth analysis of ISIL's impact on the practice of religion in Iraq. So to start things off, let's talk about the rise and fall of the Islamic State. The Islamic State in Iraq and Levant, known most notably by the acronyms ISIL and ISIS, is a terrorist network with the explicit goal of forming a caliphate. The terrorist group itself is based in Islam, but it takes many notable teachings out of context and is known for extreme conservatism, most notably with Sharia law and its treatment of women and religion, especially minorities. It arose in the border region between Iraq and Syria in 2014, taking advantage of government weaknesses and the constant divide between Sunni and Shia Muslims before it drove Iraq's government out of multiple key cities and began to impose its rule on the local populace. Eventually, the Islamic State was defeated through a coalition of Iraq's government, Kurdish forces, and Western Arab coalition allies in the year 2018. However, it's still present within the modern Middle East in many areas, most notably in Syria. With all that said and done, the aftermath is still unclear. But from what we can understand, key cells continue to operate off of funds raised in their 4-year reign of terror. Iraq's Shia Muslim majority government is gradually retaking control, but it continues to neglect a multitude of minorities in the country, including the Sunni Muslims, to whom ISIL belonged to, Chaldean Christians, and now an almost non-existent Jewish population. A key consequence of ISIL's rampage includes the mass migration of minorities, especially of the Christian faith, out of Iraq. This can be attributed in a large part due to the losses Jews and Christians received in terms of their religious heritage, birthplaces, sites of worship, and destruction of their own faiths. So, let's start with the destruction of religious symbols. In July 2014, to give a few examples, ISIS destroyed a tomb of Jonah inside the mosque of the prophet Yunus in the city of Mosul. This was a site of great religious importance to both Jews and Christians, seeing as Jonas was a powerful prophet within the religions, and it was heartbreaking, to say the least. ISIL has also destroyed countless other religious sites and places of worship, including the St. Marcorcus Church and the 7th century Green Church. This is combined with a widespread destruction of artifacts and religious symbols for both Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike. ISIS was doing this in part to raise funds. These were artifacts that were considered very expensive, very wealthy, and they sold them on the black market to finance their operations. And in addition to that, it was also against their religious policies to tolerate these sites, as they were seen as a form of blasphemy against the Muslim ISIL religion, or rather their interpretation of it. So with that in mind, I'm here to offer a quote from my Arabic professor, Sana Kika. She's a Chaldean Christian who lived in Erbil. Erbil was never taken over by ISIL, but they were less than 40 miles outside the boundaries of the city, and Sana and her family were prepared to flee. She stated that when they, specifically ISIL, entered all of these villages, they cut and broke all of the crosses. They burned down all of the churches. They destroyed all of that. We as Christians believe we have a root in the history of Iraq and in the Middle East, and it's hard. I always tell my mother and father, especially when I'm here, when I come to the United States, I tell them, if you struggle to believe that you are real Christians, you don't have to worry. You are real Christians. You have been through ages. Your parents and grandparents have been struggling to keep that faith. This is the maximum amount of pain or struggle a real Christian can have for their faith. So, what does this all mean for religion? What does ISIL's actions and the things it's perpetrated within Iraq mean for the religions of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism? Religion, though it preaches of the unseen, of the things that you cannot touch, puts a great deal of emphasis on the physical to serve as a connection to the spiritual aspects of the world. The destruction of places of worship not only prevents worshipers from practicing and participating in services, but also creates an era of fear and intimidation. Without the anchors of icons, churches, temples, mosques, and other physical attributes that contribute to a religion's practice, members of these religions can feel disillusioned from their faiths to mixed results. ranging anywhere from questioning their beliefs to outright leaving the church and renouncing their faith. With that in mind, let's discuss each of the three main religions and the impact ISIL has had in those areas. We'll start with Christianity. To quote the vicar, Andrew White, "The time has come where it is over. No Christians will be left. The Christians are coming out of Iraq and in ISIS areas in the Middle East all say the same thing. There is no way they're ever going back. They have had enough." According to the charity Open Doors, Iraq's Christian population has plummeted from 1.5 million members in Iraq in 2003 to less than 250,000 in the year 2018. This is in a large part due to the destruction of heritage sites and the era of persecution they received from both Saddam Hussein's government, the following Iraqi national government, and then ISIL's regime caliphate within the nation. With their inability to practice in safe areas, to worship icons, and to have access to heritage sites while being safe, Christianity in Iraq is splintering out. It is distributing from the nation, and it is leaving Iraq's borders, leaving a great hole in the cultural aspect of the nation. Going on to Islam, ISIL has severely splintered Iraq's Muslim population, especially along the Sunni-Shia divide. ISIL itself was a Sunni, and Iraq's Sunni minorities flocked to it because they faced heightened persecution due to the mistrust garnered from the time period, especially under the new government that was nationally imposed by the United States and the coalition partners from the West. A multitude of mosques were indeed destroyed in ISIL's advance, and under their rule, Muslims were required to conform to conservative Islamic teachings, including growing a beard, more religious dietary restrictions, headwear, the treatment of women, especially when it comes to education. Women were not allowed to leave the homes and were required to wear burqas. It was a much more conservative feel for the religion itself, and it splintered a lot of people because many Iraqis actually flocked to ISIL due to the fact that the Sunni minority within the country had been persecuted under both Saddam Hussein and the modern government. Which it is continuing to be persecuted by the modern government that's been implemented. Going from Islam to Judaism, Judaism has a long established history in Iraq, but in the 1950s, Iraq's government began a discrimination policy against all Jews within the territorial borders of Iraq. This was in a large part due to the creation of Israel after World War II. In solidarity with the Palestinian locals, Iraq's leaders and the leaders of the wider Arab world made the decision to start persecuting Jews within Iraq's borders. Approximately 75% of Iraq's Jewish population, as a result, emigrated to Israel due to the fact that they received widespread persecution under Iraq's government. Their bank accounts were frozen. They were unable to shop. They were unable to practice their religions. They were unable to start businesses, work for a living, drive cars. In many cases, they experienced violence from both mobs and from the government itself. And with that in mind, Iraq's government began a procedural sort of thing that would allow their population of Jews to emigrate to Iraq or Israel. So with all that in mind, there was a lot left behind when they did that, especially when it comes to temples and heritage sites. And those heritage sites were destroyed in ISIL's movement throughout the country, causing a further disconnect with Iraq's Jews in Israel and their homeland. Iraq's Jews within Israel's boundaries have always viewed Iraq as a sort of ancestral homeland, and ISIL's rampage through the nation destroyed a lot of that connection that they had. So it challenged their faiths in many ways. And the conclusion that I draw from this is that from a political lens, ISIL was a symptom of increasing disconnect between Iraq's Sunni minority, who has traditionally held power, especially under Saddam Hussein, and the Shia majority, which encompasses the rest of the nation. Combined with the uncertainty and the inability of the previous government to control its borders, ISIL was able to make sweeping gains in Iraq and recruit thousands of followers. And from a religious lens, ISIL clearly demonstrated the after effects of what happens when a religious group is cut off from places of worship, icons, and heritage sites, and from the fundamental right to feel safe when practicing their religion, even as Western as that may seem. When a group loses touch with the physical aspects of their denomination or faith, maintaining belief in the non-physical becomes infinitely harder. And disillusionment and migration are direct results that come out of that. And with all that in mind, I thought it'd be a fitting picture to end on this note. These are two Iraqi Christians that were captured, and their fate is unknown, but they were mistreated by ISIL. ISIL's rampage across Iraq, though largely checked at the moment, is just a symptom of further religious persecution within the nation and inequality between practitioners of different faiths. And it goes to show that when a religion does not have access to sites of worship, sites of congregation, when it doesn't have access to heritage sites and places of worship, and when it doesn't have access to icons and physical connections to their religion, the faith between that individual and that group and their faith in general is shaken to the core, because religion itself is a very spiritual practice, and it connects an individual on a physical plane to something that is no longer or has never even been on a spiritual plane, on the physical plane. And by severing connections to that spiritual plane, religious practitioners struggle to come to terms with that loss of connection, that loss of feeling to a higher power that they believe in. With all that said and done, I thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that we can all take away something from this, and I wish you the best. Have a great break. Hope you're well.